Looking for a complete care guide on the Chinese cave gecko? Stick around, we'll let you know everything that you need to know. Hey guys, how's it going and welcome back to the channel. Now, if you're new here, and I know a lot of you are because of that graph right there, make sure if you do enjoy the video to head down there, press that like button and the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Okay, let's get into things. Now today we are going to be going over a complete care guide of the Chinese cave gecko. Within this care guide, we'll be talking about the 5 main things you need to know to care for the Chinese cave gecko. That including things like the enclosure size, heating and lighting, the humidity, what the diet is for the cave gecko, and lastly, what to fill the enclosure with. So with all that being said, let's start off with number 1, the enclosure size for your cave gecko. When it comes to the enclosure for the Chinese cave gecko, you really don't need something that big. Chinese cave geckos, of course, also being nocturnal, and then a shy and reclusive species, comparatively speaking to other reptiles, they really don't need much room because they don't really explore all too much. Of course, combining that with the fact that the cave gecko is a pretty small gecko, ranging around the 7 to 8 inches, maybe slightly bigger, you can really get away with for a bare minimum size being a 10-gallon enclosure. Now, personally for me, I do think 10 gallons are kind of lame. They're just a little bit small for even a gecko of that size, so personally for me, I would recommend something like a 20 long. Right now we have our pair of Chinese cave geckos in a 20 long. They're doing absolutely fantastic. Something to note about the Chinese cave geckos is the fact that they don't only like to hide, but I have noticed at night when they're awake, so somewhere around 1 a.m. in the morning when I just happen to be up and I want to go look at my nocturnal reptiles. Cave geckos actually also do like to climb, so I would utilize some climbing opportunities or even give an enclosure that could have some height as well with it. So not only does the cave gecko have a little bit of a vertical room, but also horizontal. I messed that up. You guys know what I'm saying. Well, when it comes to the cave gecko, you can get away with a 10-gallon enclosure. However, if you got a spare 20 laying around, the gecko would really appreciate it, and it would just be a better experience for the animal altogether. Now, of course, those enclosure requirements are actually only for the adults. If you are getting a baby or juvenile cave gecko, which usually is the case, I would opt for something a little bit more smaller, just to make sure that the gecko feels secure within its enclosure. Personally, for me, when we first hatch babies, we put them in a 6-quart shoebox bin, just like any other baby crested gecko. Once those outgrow those enclosures, so that juvenile, sub-adult size, usually the range when they are ready to go to their new home, I would offer something around a 5-gallon or comparatively speaking of a tub size for that. Then at that point, once the animal gets a little bit larger and it is a little bit bigger, you can then opt for those minimum requirements or even larger that we talked about a little bit earlier in the video. But moving on, we still have plenty of stuff to talk about, and that is going to bring us to number 2, heating and lighting for your cave gecko. First off, let's get into heating your cave geckos, and I find the heating requirements for a cave gecko being very counterintuitive to a reptile species, and that's the fact is they like to be kept kind of cool. In fact, Chinese cave geckos really thrive at room temperatures. Anywhere between that 65 to 75 degrees is perfect for the cave gecko, which I know is really funny. You think of reptiles, think of basking lights, all this extra do-hide stuff, getting that 90 to 100 degree basking spot. No, absolutely not for cave geckos. In fact, high heats can actually be detrimental to the animal itself. That's why you really don't want your temperatures when it comes to the Chinese cave gecko's enclosure to range anywhere above 80 degrees. You really, 75 is kind of the highest you want to go. If you're a little bit higher, 76, 77, it's not a big deal. However, anything above to the high 70s to low 80s is going to be detrimental to the animal. Easy way to do this is just keep it in a room and you're kind of set. I don't do anything special for my cave geckos. They don't have any supplemental heating. The room itself stays at around 76 to 77 degrees, which is perfectly fine for the animal, and that's about it. It's literally the easiest animal, comparatively speaking to everything else, to heat. You just put it in an enclosure, good to go. And of course, moving on, let's get into the lighting requirements for cave geckos, which again, I don't think I would really recommend any. Of course, cave geckos being a nocturnal species, they are not out during the day. I absolutely will never see my cave geckos out during the day. They're always in their hides, usually even when it starts getting the evening, when the lights are off, they're still in their hides. It's only at that nighttime, somewhere around, I don't know, the midnight to 2 a.m. range when the gecko really comes out and explores. With all that being said, I don't really think UVB is a sufficient thing or even beneficial, in my opinion, for the cave gecko because they're not going to go absorb absorb it. Of course, you can use UVB for your animals. I would definitely go with a lower wattage or lower exposure bulb, something like the 2.5s or the jungle versions of those, making sure that you're not getting too much exposure. I do actually believe that too much exposure UVB for cave geckos may be detrimental to their health. If you're a UVB crazed person and you're just like, every reptile needs UVB because that's what it gets in the wild, go for it. I would definitely use low exposure bulbs, making sure that nothing's overexposed. But if you're just like me and you're like, well, Dakota, if room temperature does it and it's a nocturnal species, I don't see a reason to use UVB, then you are also completely fine on that area as well. Now, section 2 might have been a little bit short. There really wasn't much to talk about. Just put them in an enclosure and you're kind of good to go. Literally no heating or lighting requirements, which I find a little bit funny if you look through all my care guides, and this is like the first time this has actually happened. But let's get into the next section, which is going to be number 3, the humidity requirements for your cave gecko. While heating and lighting kind of took a back seat, the humidity is something you really do want to keep an eye on. Now, when it comes to the humidity for cave geckos, they do require pretty high up there. Of course, being a tropical species, you're going to want relatively high humidity. Anywhere around the 70 to 80% is key for the Chinese cave gecko to actually thrive within its setup. I really wouldn't want the humidity dropping anywhere lower from that 50 to 60. The 70 to 80 is really that sweet spot. And let's talk a little bit of how you can retain humidities within these enclosures. If you're using something like an aquarium, of course, having an open screen top, I would really recommend sealing that top with anything like, personally for me, I'm using metal tape. I've seen people use towels to close it down. I think metal tape's the easiest. It's like $7 over at Amazon. You just kind of tape it up and you're good to go. I leave a little bit out so there's some air exchange, but all in all, I seal it up pretty high. It's really hard to retain humidity inside an open screen top, especially something like an aquarium. You're gonna really struggle getting those humidity levels up to that 70-80% with something like that. So Amazon.com, get some metal tape. Here's some B-roll of showing what it looks like. Is you literally just tape it in and you're good to go. It's that easy. Substrate plays a vital role in retaining humidity to those levels that we need. Personally for me, I'm using a mix of cocoa blocks and cocoa fiber. I know it's a little strange on DVCB Exotics. I usually go for something like a topsoil peat moss mix, but I have these two things lying around. There is a multitude of substrates you can use that are high retention for humidity. I actually made a little playlist or a video right here talking about a lot of ways you can retain humidity, but pretty much deep substrate, plenty of water with not too much because you don't want it to saturate, and then just misting daily or regular mistings will make sure that you keep that humidity top notch and keep your cave geckos happy. And then getting down to it, we only have a couple more things to go over, and that is going to bring us to number 4, the diet requirements for Chinese cave geckos. When it comes to the diet for the cave gecko, it's relatively easy. Chinese cave geckos being insectivores, you're really just going to want to feed a variety of insects. This includes the multiple things available out there, including dubia roaches, lobster roaches, red runners, crickets, waxworms, mealworms, superworms, red wigglers, black soldier fly larvae, and the list goes on. Coarse variety being the key phrase in this sentence. You do not want to feed a staple of any one of these things. Of course, dubias being very high in protein, while wax and superworms being high in fat. They're not going to get all the nutrition out of just one insect. So the key there is giving a variety of things. Some roaches here and there, some crickets here and there, some superworms and waxworms as an occasional treat will make sure that your cave gecko is getting all the nutrients it requires out of those insects in order to live, again, a happy, healthy life. The only thing I would recommend other than giving a variety to your animal is just gut loading the insects. Now, insects that come in, if you're getting them from the little Tupperware things like this, they're fed a very poor diet. Usually it's just potatoes or those weird orange cubes. What is this? I don't know what it is. I don't really want my food eating that for my animal. Doesn't sound really good. Just feed them some good veggies. Anything like scraps, maybe you got some salad that went a little bit undone. You got some veggies in there that's looking a little bit too ripe for human consumption. You throw that in there for your crickets, your roaches, your worms, whatever. They eat it, hour later, you throw it in for the animal. It's happy, it has a full belly. Your animal not only gets the nutrients from the carrot or whatever you put into, but also nutrients from your animal. It's a win-win. Gut loading your food, not that hard. Alrighty folks, getting down into it. We learned a lot about the cave gecko in this video. We learned about the enclosure size, heating and lighting, or I guess the lack of, the humidity requirements, and then the diet. But however, there is one more thing we need to get over, and that is going to be number 5, what to fill the enclosure with. When it comes to what to fill the enclosure with for your Chinese cave gecko, it's a fairly simple task. If you don't know anything like crocodile skinks or anything like that, I pretty much mimic how I would set up a crocodile skink enclosure with how I would set up a Chinese cave gecko enclosure. In fact, there's a video right there if you want to go really big into like a bioactive planted vivarium type style. Now, when it comes to what to fill the enclosure with cave geckos, hides are an absolute must. Personally, for me, I have around 4 to 5 different hides for my Chinese cave gecko, so he can pick on where he wants to go. If my my pair wants to separate, there are separate hides. There's a multitude of different hides that they can hide in. Sometimes they like to stay together. Sometimes they want to go other places. It's all good. But cave geckos actually have a specific hide where they use the bathroom. There's a coconut hide where if you lift it up, there's just poops in there. It makes cleaning the enclosure really easy. All I have to do is take up that coconut hide, scoop the poop out, and put it back. It's a little funny. It's funny how intelligent these things can seem when we think of geckos being just a little bit on the dull end of the stick. Now when it comes with anything else to use, of course we kind of already went over that deep substrate. I like to create little holes and little coves, almost like burrows, like little tunnels that my cave geckos can venture into. Other than that, I do have somewhat of a climbing area. I've got a little bit of a, I'm not sure what the wood is called. Here's some B-roll right there with a little plant in it. The animal can climb up it. Of course, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Cave geckos seem to be just slightly arboreal. They do like to climb, so I wanted to give that for my animals, and I think everyone should as well. With that being said, I think that's about it. Put some hides in there, maybe a stick or two for them to climb up on, and you're kind of good to go. Cave geckos, while they are a little bit of a sly reclusive species, they are not too difficult to care for, as long as, of course, you use that variety of insects and the humidity requirements are on point. Well, folks, there you have it. How to care for a Chinese cave gecko. Not that hard. I don't know why people seem to think these guys are a little bit more of a difficult species to care for. It's not been the case, in my opinion. With some regular misting, making sure that enclosure is sealed, and then putting up some hides, I've had literally zero issues with my cave geckos. They thrive, and yeah, I think cave geckos actually do make a pretty good pet, and as long as you got the humidity going, you really shouldn't have any problems with them whatsoever. That is gonna wrap it up for today. Of course, if you guys want to check me out on any of my other social media platforms or potentially get some Chinese cave geckos from me, you can find me over at Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Facebook and Instagram is the best place to reach me for the babies I produce, including cave geckos, but there's still one more thing for the end of the video, and that is, of course, going to be Patreon. Patreon.com/gbcbexotics. This is where you get the up-to-date updates on everything that's going on within my breeding business. This includes the plethora of products I've got going on, including cave geckos, New Caledonian geckos, gargs and cresties, monitor lizards, ball pythons, tokays. We have a variety of stuff going on over here. You get the first look at everything that's happening within my business. You get bonus content, bonus videos that I don't show to the public, and even first dibs on the babies I produce when I have them for sale. It's all well and good, starts as low as $1 a month. If you want to check that out or get some more information, you can find that down there in the link in the description below. And of course, as always, folks, thank you so much for taking the time in your day to follow me over at DBCB Exotics. We will see you next time, which should be Monday. That is going to be it. But until then, goodbye.